Je vais continuer en anglais parce que c'est peut-être pour que tout le monde puisse me comprendre. What am I currently working on? I'm working on the project of the future of government 2030 plus. So it's a project that combines foresight and design for policy. We are looking at the future and how the future might look like in 2030 and beyond 2030. What are the changing power balances in society and how relations between citizens and governments are reshaping. So we are thinking what are the challenges nowadays in the relationship between citizens and governments, what are the needs, expectations, and imaginaries of all of us for the future. For example, we can think of technological drivers such as Internet of Things or AI, how they will impact these relations, as well as some societal or economic factors, information abundance, digital platform economy, trust, participation, etc. According to ID8 DigiWorld, a digital economy think tank, top 5 technologies for 2025 are AI, IoT, robotics, cybersecurity, and big data technologies. It is assumed that these technologies will have a major influence on our digital future. So it is important that we think in terms of these technologies that are pervading our lives and their societal, political, and ethical impacts. As we heard at the beginning today in the first slides, it is estimated that people receive nowadays more than 100,000 words per day, or 23 words per second. That means around 34 gigabytes of information per day, if we add some pictures, videos, games, etc. Also, in 2017, there were almost 500,000 tweets every minute, which is an increase of 58% since 2013. 500,000 of comments on Facebook posted every minute, or 300,000 statuses, or more than 100 photos uploaded on Facebook. What I find particularly fascinating is that each minute of every day there are between 2 and 3 million Google searches conducted worldwide. So this abundance of information could have led to better informed citizens and more engaged. However, we run into problems of focusing and short attention span, which doesn't allow much time for reflection. We struggle to make sense, and we have difficulties to discern more important information from less important, or information from misinformation or disinformation, especially in so little time that we have. So, do algorithms help us make sense of the world and cope with uncertainties? Does collective massive amount of data to detect patterns and generate scenarios of future behavior help us steer better or easier towards the future? How does it change our relations with the future? These technologies bring many advantages in our societies and empower citizens, that is clear. They are very valuable for us and our contemporary ways of living. They connect people, they enable easier lives. All of us probably have online banking, online shopping, easier working. I cannot imagine nowadays how I would do research without the internet. Each new platform is easier to use and it is more convenient. So it boosts globalization and connection among people in the world. And we could stop here. However, there is uncertainty about how algorithms work, especially if you think of general public. And at the same time, algorithmic functions pre-configure users into their designs. Often users are not aware of automated processes that use their data and direct their presentation in a desirable way. Algorithms contain human biases as they are written by humans, and often they contain gender biases as they are often written by men. And we can talk about algorithmic determinism because they base the choice for us on our past experience. Therefore, they restrict our choice into the past, the choice for the future. An example is Netflix, for instance. When we log into Netflix, we see that they give us a selection of movies based on what we have already seen. So here are some issues that are valuable exploring are shifting power relations, datafication, surveillance, privacy, cybersecurity, as well as disinformation, manipulation, and propaganda. What is datafication? Datafication means transformation of social action into online quantified data. It means converting everything into data, making data out of different parts of our lives. This is the basis of digital platforms' business model. It means transforming users' activities and practices into data, and even promoting self-tracking narratives, self-tracking through, for instance, narratives of a healthy lifestyle. I'm sure you have heard of movements such as quantified self. I have done research and published in this area a few years ago. These are people who wear different sensors and use apps to measure different things. Maybe some of you use, for instance, Fitbit, but there are many more. To measure calories, food we eat, steps we take, how much we sleep, what is, how much we woke up during the night or turned around. And often these people think that every part of our life can be put in numbers and quantified. In Belgium now, and I believe it's the same everywhere, you can give the approval to have your medical records merged. That's great because it makes our lives easier. For instance, if our cardiologists send us to the endocrinologist because we have high cholesterol and we need to do some further testings, we don't need to take all our documents with us because it's enough for the doctor, for another specialist, just to open our file and see all our data inside. But if your insurance company has access to it, or your bank, or your employer, I think you would think twice. You remember the film Gattaca and the main character? How many troubles the poor guy had only because his data was not fitting the profile of his job. He wanted to be an astronaut. That's why it is important that they comply with fundamental rights and freedoms, and that not everyone has access to your personal data. Also, as we are unconsciously leaving our digital imprints everywhere while consuming digital media, the clouds and platforms nowadays contain an enormous quantity of data that can be sold. And this can enable both companies as well as governments to control and monitor citizens. So I imagine this process as a circle which starts and ends with humans, citizens, us. So humans write algorithms. Algorithms personalize the content based on our data, which leads to the creation of filter bubbles. And this control of information leads to further polarization of the society. Filter bubbles can lead to disinformation. That is, they can lead to easier spreading of disinformation in the bubble. This is from a Eurobarometer survey from last year. So there is a lack of trust in institutions, in national institutions, in governments, in political institutions, but also in media. And this makes the citizen prone to manipulation. On the European level, it seems that 6 respondents in 10 tend not to trust media. There are only 3 countries in Europe in which the majority of respondents tend to trust media. These are Finland, Portugal, and Bulgaria. At the other end of the scale, we have, for instance, Greece with only 15% of trust. Even the UK, where we have media such as BBC, public broadcaster, we have only 21% of people who trust media. And for instance, here in France, 23% of people say that they trust media. So this low trust weakens political knowledge. People get more easily manipulated, and it obstructs the watchdog role of media and impacts the democracy. At the same time, many citizens turn to social media as a source of information today. This is a graph from a digital news report that Reuters Institute for Journalism publishes every year. You can see here how many people in several countries, not only in Europe, but we have also Brazil, Australia, how many people use social media as a source of information. In the European Union, the average is 46%. In some countries, the percentage is low, for instance, in Germany, which is only 31%. In others, it's considerably high. In Croatia, for example, 72% of citizens use social media as a source of information. Therefore, as we have seen, we don't believe our governments and media, but instead we tend to trust platforms more. So we can assume that and say that platforms are interfering with our democracy, and institutions need to take trust back from businesses, because we should not forget that they make lots of money from generated from our data. What I really like about this Council of Europe report on information disorder is this distinction that they make between misinformation, disinformation, and malinformation, where this misinformation means false information shared without an intent to harm. Disinformation means false information shared with the intent to harm, and malinformation is a genuine information shared to cause harm. Misinformation and disinformation are nothing new. I grew up on the Balkans in 1990s, and there was an abundance of disinformation during the war, during the dictatorship. So, yeah, this is really nothing new. But what is new and what is different is that this disinformation has been transformed and became more powerful thanks to digital platforms and algorithms that enable easier spreading of disinformation via personalization. And that is harmful for the public sphere. As you see, I don't use the term fake news. Why? Because I believe that fake news is a misnomer. It's not news, it's simply disinformation. And also it is used by politicians to discredit certain media, to say that they don't agree with them because they are not defending their positions. The term is very much politicized, and that is why I'm avoiding it. Also, we should not forget that disinformation is not used nowadays only to get more votes, but it can be also used to make profit. A famous example here are Macedonian teenagers from a small city of Veleš in Macedonia who earned lots of money by disseminating disinformation. One of the famous is that the Pope supported Donald Trump during the 2016 US electoral campaign. Disinformation has negative effects on media consumption, and it shapes political attitudes even when it is proved to be false. So, what can we do about it? Well, I will start with ethical discussions on algorithms which are very much needed on a global scale. And there are numerous entities that are already working on this, as well as we have also started to work on it at the European Commission. There is a need to involve different stakeholders who should work together on this. An example is Montreal Declaration on Artificial Intelligence from last year, also AI Now Institute, and what is crucial here is algorithmic auditing. So we need to question the responsibility and accountability of digital platforms in new technologies, IoT, AI, etc. We should ask for more transparency. Transparency of algorithms would mean knowing how and why a decision was made. In connection to disinformation also, platforms should have more transparency in prioritizing, in explaining how they prioritize content, as well transparency of source of information. So we need to design also fairer interfaces. And it is crucial that algorithms are controlled for human biases. There were several examples lately, especially in the US, where we saw this gender, race, sexual orientation, age biases. Also, a very important thing that one of the speakers mentioned before me is the accountability. Institutions should be held accountable for decisions made by algorithms that they use. What I suggest are policies that are more suitable and co-designed by citizens, because we need to create a society which is more resilient to disinformation. So actually at JRC, we try to do that through involving people via design for policy, via public engagement and prototyping. So through co-design and co-creation. In order to protect citizens from disinformation, there are many initiatives that are currently taking place on the EU level. A few years ago, there was a communication on online platforms, then communication on illegal content. I myself, I have participated in the last 2 days on 2 such events. There is an expert group on fake news and disinformation. A consultation was open till yesterday. There are different hearings and panels, and also the Commission is supporting projects that are strengthening media freedoms. Ultimately, I would say there is a need to increase trust in political institutions and in media. Roger McNamee, an early investor in Facebook, Google, and Amazon, suggested to approach social media in a way similar to tobacco and alcohol. He said that we should combine education and regulation. So let's take a look at both. There is a European General Data Protection Regulation. I don't know if you know about it. It is coming into force in May this year. Otherwise, it has been prepared already for 6-7 years. And the Consumer Protection Organization and similar actors believe that it could play a role in protecting citizens' privacy and data. The GDPR also restricts automated decision-making based on profiling, and individuals can be informed and able to access the data about them, collected about them, so they have some sort of the right to explanation, which could lead to increasing transparency and fairness of algorithms. However, I'm thinking if this will really be possible, because companies often prefer to pay fines than to really obey regulations. Also, although I agree that the regulation is necessary, for instance, I'm very much in favor of prohibiting hate speech, there should be clear distinctions between regulation and censorship. Governments should not censor free speech. That is why I personally don't believe in fact-checking, which is an initiative, and there are some new legislations in some European countries, even here in France, proposed. I think that they could be potentially dangerous because we are slowly turning into Ministry of Truth, and especially in countries where we have populist or extreme right regimes in power. We should not also forget that the censorship existed in some parts of Europe in a not so distant past, and it should not be back if we want to protect our European values and democratic societies. So while through competent legal and political means and frameworks, users should be protected, they can be further empowered via media literacy. So media literacy means an ability to evaluate critically media, to assess media. All stakeholders with whom I talked personally, and that they are discussing the problem of disinformation and the impacts of algorithms, agree that it is important to develop data and algorithmic literacies and to empower users to have more agency. I've been working on a project about it, Future of Audiences, for the past 3 years. Media and data literacies can enable citizens to recognize misinformation, disinformation, and manipulation. There are several initiatives that are already taking place, but it is a very difficult task, especially if we are thinking of vulnerable groups such as children. Media literacy is considered to play an important role here because it helps understand differences between, for example, investigative journalism and editorial journalism from propagandistic journalism. It also teaches how to check sources and facts, which is not common for an average user. So there is a need to develop critical thinking amongst citizens to understand these processes, and not only in connection to disinformation, but also, for instance, making informed decisions about sharing their data. Some countries, such as Denmark, focus on digital citizenship education. So we could envisage our future as either utopian, where everything is driven and solved by the technology and the appearance that everything is great, or a dystopian where the world will turn into Ministry of Truth and Big Brother, and we will be controlled, every our step will be controlled. However, we need to look beyond this. We need to think of the future of democracy and broader societal and ethical impacts of new technologies, and not only disinformation. And so to conclude, I would say that we must engage in present in order to be better prepared for the future. Thank you.